In 2014, award-winning author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie published We Should All Be Feminists. Inspired by this acclaimed essay, we now welcome the New York Times' Francesca for an interview with Guðlaugur Thór Thórdarson, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Development Cooperation of Iceland, speaking live in our studio for a discussion of why all of us, including men, should be feminists.
Hi there, good morning from me, good afternoon to you. Thank you for giving me a couple of minutes of your time. I wanted to actually begin this conversation with a challenge. Looking at Iceland's diplomatic priorities, gender issues like women's and girls' rights, LGBTQ rights, combating discrimination and elevating equality are already on your list. You have consistently ranked at the top of the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index. Why not follow the lead of Sweden, Canada, Mexico, and others and formally adopt a feminist foreign policy?
Well, when it comes to more foreign policy, gender equality is in our DNA. And I think it's more important to take action than talk. And it's regardless. I mean, because everyone in Iceland has a lot of jobs. I'm a Minister of Foreign Affairs, but also when it comes to development programs, defense and security, and trade. In all of these sectors, gender equality is a key. So we feel that we are doing those things, and we are championing gender equality. I think it's much more important than, obviously, you mentioned that we are on top of the list when it comes to this index. And it means for us, it's a big responsibility. And we want to lead by an example. And I believe that we are doing in many ways. And we have been fortunate when we look at Iceland that I think if we're going to take one thing out of it, is that we did have the first democratically elected female president. And she was and is not only a woman, she was also a single mother. So during the time she was elected, there were two things that people were using against her. And she showed us all that by leading by an example, that how gender equality is important. And actually, I've heard many, I'm not joking, I've heard many people say, when Reagan and Gorbachev came here in 1986, they first realized that men could also become presidents.
To go back to my original question, though, so do you feel that adopting a feminist foreign policy would be more, is it more talk than actual action? Are you saying that Iceland has the action, but maybe doesn't put its stake in the ground and say, we are formally doing this?
We are definitely, I think we are everywhere. I mean, we're not just talking about it, we are putting it into action. There's no secret. This is gender equality is something that is in every part. I mentioned defense and security. There is gender equality is a priority for us. Development programs. Gender equality is a priority for us. When it comes to trade, gender equality is also a priority. And we are always embracing and putting on the agenda gender equality. So I'm not saying I do not understand the question, but I think that we are showing by example the importance of gender equality everywhere.
Maybe you could give an example of trade, for example, or one of the other things that you mentioned of how you are putting equality, gender equality first and foremost in those areas.
For example, when it comes to free trade agreements and also in the WTO, we have an initiative in WTO that we should put into the address gender equality in the trade agreements. And for us, it's very simple. We, of course, and we do it also when it comes to human rights and other things that you mentioned. We are fortunate to be a small part of the population of the world, which takes things for granted, take values for granted, which others are not as lucky to have. So we are promoting them everywhere we can. And actually, because you mentioned trade and economics, then when it comes to economic growth, the nations who have more economic growth, no more gender equality, usually have more economic growth. So for us, it's on every area. When it comes to defense and security, then it's extremely important that you also have half of the populations taking actions, taking decisions. And actually, it's very important if you, for example, if you're going to have peace in some areas which you have wars and other things, it's very hard to achieve that without women.
Right. Recognizing, of course, that no country is perfect, not even Iceland, could you name one or two areas of focus that you feel specifically need more work and talk about what you plan to do about it?
We are far from perfect. We are just trying to share what we have, what's been a success with us, and we are trying to learn from others where we are not as good. If you're going to mention a few, we have, of course, glass ceilings. We have glass ceilings when it comes to the largest firms in Iceland, for example, that they are, I think, 20% are led by women. And of course, we have endless of challenges everywhere. And the day you take things for granted, like gender equality, the day you get complacent, then you're going to go downhill. There is no doubt about that. But I mean, this is a never-ending. I don't know if you're going to say a struggle or just a task.
Right, completely. And actually, I was thinking about complacency, because when you're at the top of the Global Gender Gap Index, how do you avoid complacency? And I feel like you answered that question by saying, never be complacent. But do you have anything to add to that?
Well, we do have strong, not only women, but fortunately also men, because you're never going to achieve gender equality if boys and men are not active. But we have very strong advocates for gender equality who constantly reminds us of. We have, for example, one who is in organizing, and many of them who are organizing these events. Just to take one example. But I think what you can say, I mean, if we have achieved something, is that, of course, things have changed a lot in the last few decades, and there is no political force, no political party in Iceland who wants to reverse or go back. And that says something.
Yeah. And so, I mean, to take it back to those glass ceilings that you mentioned, what do you do about that? Quotas?
That's one of the things.
For example, yeah.
Quotas is one thing. Of course, we have done a lot of things. It's not only that we have had a lot of strong, great females who have been the leaders and led by an example. And it's not only a famous person. Personally, I never understood this debate, because I was fortunate that my mother, she was at the time when usually women were working at home. She was, well, you could say at that time was a career work. When she quit at the municipality, then her job was split up to two, and there were two men who took that over. And so I never understood the question. And I was also fortunate that my father, he was also a very strong person, and he was never, he also had the self-belief that this didn't annoy him, even though my mother had a higher pay and so on. So I believe that we do have it in our DNA, and the reason I do believe it is that when I listen to my kids, because they have so much knowledge and feelings for these important things.
Interesting. You know, I think we can all agree that men should be feminists, but how do we make them so? Clearly, you grew up in a very special household, but especially when many women themselves don't count themselves as feminists, what what do we do with young boys and men and children who aren't necessarily growing up in a household that promotes equality, or whether it's a role model of a mother working or whatnot?
Well, I mean, all ideas need to be spread out, and you need to show the example. I think, for me, it's very important that we are aware of that gender equality, there are no losers when you achieve gender equality. There are only winners. It's a win-win game. Then I come back with who in Iceland wants to go back? We don't want to go back for obvious reasons. So I think, to be honest, because I've spoken about gender equality both home and abroad, and then sometimes I see a little bit frightened in the faces of the men I'm talking to. I'm trying to explain to them, you're not going to lose anything from it. You're only going to win. And I think that when people realize that, and we do it by showing facts, I mentioned economic growth, but many other things. I mean, who wants to go back and say, okay, let's say men, I didn't want to spend all this time with my kids. I don't think that anyone wants that seriously. But this is, you could say, common sense, obvious things, but you need to point it out. You need to work on it. And we need constantly to explain things which are maybe very simple, but unfortunately, the largest part of the world is not enjoying the things that we do take for granted.
Right. And really, it sounds like backing it up with data and fact is kind of your approach. I'd like to end with a personal question, if you don't mind. I know that you're a father of many. When I was preparing for this, I was listening to quite a few videos and going back in time, and I found something in that Hannah Birna Kristjansdóttir, forgive my awful pronunciation, said back in 2019. She said that she really experiences gender equality when at night her daughters call for their father as much as for her. And moving to the personal, I'd like to ask you, when do you really experience gender equality?
Well, when I talk to my kids. Well, it's a question I really need to think about it, but we usually take most things for granted. And I think about my kids, if they were asked things that maybe I was asked, at my young age, do you think that women can do everything men do, and questions like which you don't have anymore, I think they would laugh. I mean, my wife, she is an entrepreneur. She has run her own business very successfully since her early 20s. And my kids, I think they obviously do not think that those, I don't know what to say, traditional, or at least the old-fashioned way when it comes to mother and father. It's something that is both a pioneer and a great female leader. I think she's right there, and I think that this is something that we all are experiencing.
Brilliant. Next year, I think we bring your kids up on the stage and we put them to the test. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your thoughtful comments. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.